Hello, thanks for tuning in. Today we'll be listening to Chapter 5 from the book called Nothing's Fair and 5th grade. And this chapter is called The Office Jail. Follow along as I read. The next morning, Diane, Sharon, and I walked to school, figuring out what to do about Elsie. Diane thought I should go right smack to the principal's office. Sharon thought I should tell Mrs. Hanson I wanted a conference with her. I couldn't decide what to do. The closer I got to school, the more my breakfast lumped in my stomach. "The terrible threesome," a boy's voice called out behind us. "Which one do you think's the cutest?" another boy asked. "Oh, I don't know. Depends on if you like short hair, long hair, or curly hair." We girls glanced at each other. We knew it was Chris Johnson and Mark Howard. In the girls' bathroom where we went to comb our hair, Sharon asked the mirror, "Which do you think is the cutest?" "Mark is the fairest of them all," Diane announced. "I think Chris is," I said. "You would," Diane said, putting chapstick on her lips. We weren't allowed to use lipstick. Chapstick made our lips shiny. Diane passed it around. I was at my desk watching Elsie fit her body into her seat before I remembered that I hadn't talked to Mrs. Hanson or the principal about the licorice whips. Mrs. Hanson started class by telling us to take out our arithmetic papers and pass them to the person behind us. I shrugged my shoulders when Sharon poked me in the back for my paper. After the papers were corrected, Mrs. Hanson asked for our scores. Sharon said 0 when my name was called. Mrs. Hanson stopped with her pencil above her grade book and peered at me. I know I turned red. Elsie got her usual 100. I was pokey about getting my coat on at recess. I thought I'd wait around while the other kids went out and maybe get a chance to say something to Mrs. Hanson, but she herded us all quickly out the door, locked it with her key, and went off to the faculty room. At lunch, I sat chewing my hot dog bun and wondering if Elsie would get away free. If Mrs. Hanson locked the door every day, that might be the end of the stealing. I looked over at Elsie and saw she was chewing on a licorice whip. Mrs. Hanson saw her too. She came up behind Elsie and took the whip out of her hand. "What is this?" "It's mine," Elsie said. "Where did you get it?" "It was in my lunchbox." "In your lunchbox? Are you sure?" "Yes." "Are you sure you didn't buy it?" "No, I don't have any money." Elsie kept her eyes on the licorice whip dangling above her. I raised my hand, but Mrs. Hanson ignored me. "I'll just keep this for now and give your mother a call," Mrs. Hanson said. "If she's changed your diet, I want to know about it." I put my hand down. Elsie was going to get it for sure. At lunch recess, Diane decided she would do something about Elsie's taking her money. Otherwise, she said she'd never get it back. She marched up to Elsie with Sharon and me trailing behind. "So, Elsie," she said sarcastically, "that licorice whip came in your lunchbox?" "What's it to you, Diane?" "It's plenty to me, Elsie. I got cheated out of my lunch because of you. You owe me 50 cents. "You have lots of money," Elsie mumbled. "Oh, you think so, huh?" Diane tossed her head back, flicking her bangs out of her eyes. "Well, my mother's a widow, and she works for our money. We don't even have $10 to fix our TV. So you just give me my money, Elsie Edwards." "How come you have so many dresses and pants if you're so poor?" "Because my grandma's a good sewer, that's why. Now give me my money." Elsie looked up at the sky. "I don't have any money," she said. "Come off it. Your mother isn't poor, and you know it." "That doesn't mean I have any money." Elsie kept looking up and then figured out why. She was trying to keep from crying. The playground teacher came over and asked what we were doing. Just talking, Diane said. Let's get into a game. The playground teacher took Diane's hand. Diane jerked loose. Is there a school rule against talking at recess? Listen, Missy, sometimes you're too smart-mouthed for your own good. The bell rang. Elsie moved toward the classroom. The playground teacher had to go back to the field to blow her whistle. Gee, Diane, Sharon said, you could get yourself in trouble. Diane shrugged. Oh, she's just a teacher's aide. The boys in our class came over and wanted to know what was going on. I was just trying to get my money back from that thief. Elsie, Diane told them. Elsie's the thief, Lester said. That's scrounge. We should beat her up. Go ahead and beat her up, Jack told Lester. If she falls on you, you'll be smashed dead. While we were doing oral reading, the principal came into the room. He walked down the middle aisle to Elsie's desk. You come with me, young lady, he said to Elsie. Then he turned to Mrs. Hanson and said, This young lady won't be back for a while. Mrs. Hanson nodded. All right, Mr. Douglas, that'll be fine. Elsie didn't come back all afternoon. After school, we saw a fancy sports car in the visitors' parking lot. I bet she's in the office, Diane said. So Sharon, Diane, and I trooped back to the building and peeked in the principal's window. The blinds were closed, but we could see through the slits. Sure enough, there sat the principal, Elsie's mother, and Elsie. Elsie didn't look too happy. Neither did Mrs. Edwards. She was pointed straight up in her chair like a missile ready for takeoff. Elsie got caught today, I crowed at my mother when I got home. What happened? My mother asked. You know that candy I told you she bought at the 7-Eleven? She ate it in school, and Mrs. Hanson asked her where she got it. Elsie said it was in her lunchbox. Mrs. Hanson said she'd call her mother. Then she saw Elsie and her mother with the principal in the principal's office after school. Well, that doesn't prove she took the money. Really, Mother? I said, and scooped up Dee Dee to play with in my room. After dinner, I didn't feel like doing my arithmetic again. I tried doing some of the problems and got them all wrong. I forgot how to change my answers to mixed numbers. I wished I were one of the kids who could finish the assignment at school. I went downstairs to ask Mother to help me. First, she fiddled around putting Kenny to bed, and then she picked up all his toys from the floor. Why don't you make Kenny do that? He's not a baby anymore. I was tired of waiting for her. Daddy looked up from his paper. I thought I heard you ask your mother to help you. If you're in a hurry, why don't you help her? I picked up Kenny's truck and lugged it to his playbox. Mother sat down on the davenport and opened my book. I'd better read the directions first. The school's always changing the math. It's just fractions, I told her crossly. Daddy looked up again. Silently, I waited for her to read through the 3 pages. Oh, it's the same as I remember. When you have an improper fraction in your answer, you divide the numerator by the denominator and add the whole number to the number you already have. What? I said. Look, I'll show you. She showed me 3 times and I sort of caught on. Here, we'll try a problem now, she wrote out. I got it all mixed up, of course. I dropped the pencil on the floor. I'll never get it. It isn't fair. That thief Elsie always gets 100. I don't like to hear you call that, Jennifer, Mother said. She's just a girl who's got a lot of problems. You mean she's just a girl who's giving a lot of people problems. If you're going to argue, go up to your room, my father said. We don't need that down here. I took my book and went up to my room. I lay down on my bed. I felt awful. I was tired. I wished I hadn't eaten 2 pieces of fried chicken for dinner. I could taste them. I dragged my clothes off slowly, didn't brush my teeth or wash my face. I got into bed and pulled the covers over me. I shivered. I thought of those TV commercials where the man's stomach balloons in and out and his face turns green. His pill wouldn't have helped me. I knew what I had. The flu. I wanted to tell Mother, but I felt too weak to get out of bed. I knew I was going to throw up pretty soon. I wished it would hurry up. I made it to the bathroom barely. I was on the bathroom floor with sweat running down my forehead when Mother came in. "Oh, honey, you're sick." She got a washcloth and wiped my forehead with cold water. She helped me back to bed and brought a towel, a glass of water, and a pan to put beside me. "Do you want anything else?" I shook my head. I just wanted to die. I stayed that way for 4 days. Mother would come in and coax me to drink water or juice. I'd drink it and throw up. The doctor came. He told Mother I was dehydrated, which means dried out. He said if I couldn't keep fluids down in the next 24 hours, he'd feel better if I was in the hospital. After he left, I asked Mother what good it would do to be in the hospital. Mother said they would feed me intravenously. That meant with a needle stuck in my arm. I took a sip of the apple juice, lay on my back, and waited. It came up. I took another sip of my apple juice, lay on my back, and waited. It came up. I took a tinier sip of apple juice, lay on my back, and waited, and waited, and waited. It stayed down. It was 2 days before I felt strong enough to be propped up on pillows and read a book, and it wasn't the arithmetic book. On the 3rd day, Mother wobbled into my room in her nightgown to ask me if I thought I could manage alone. I took one look at her stringy hair and white face and told her I'd be fine. She wobbled back to bed. Kenny brought me my breakfast. It was 3 pieces of toast piled with jam, a glass of milk, and a bowl of applesauce. It tasted good. He tried to give Mother breakfast, but that didn't work. He brought her an empty pan instead. To entertain me, Kenny stacked his picture books on my head and read me Green Eggs and Ham from memory. The phone rang in the afternoon. Kenny ran to answer it. It was Diane wanting to talk to me. I took my first trip downstairs in a week. Diane was chock full of school news. We talked for an hour. I didn't hear a peep from upstairs. I guess my mother wasn't in any condition to object. Diane gave me all the latest on Elsie. She said Elsie had to sit in the office during every morning recess and lunch recess. She wasn't ever allowed to be in the school building. Mrs. Hanson didn't have to lock the classroom door anymore. Diane said she met a girl from Elsie's old school at a church skating party. The girl said Elsie had stolen at that school. Only there she mostly stole food. They even caught her in the school kitchen eating up the cinnamon rolls. Diane said the kids hated Elsie at her old school, too. I wasn't the only one with the flu. A whole bunch of kids were absent. Diane said that Elsie was out, Mary Ann was out, and Jack was out. Diane wanted to know when I'd be back. I guessed in a couple of days. It was more than that because the next day Kenny was sick. I took care of him until Mother could get up. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. Don't forget to subscribe so that you can keep listening to the following chapters. Thank you. Bye-bye.